The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the weapons maintenance bay at Naval Station Norfolk as Elena Rodriguez carefully disassembled a standard-issue M4 carbine. Her movements were precise, methodical, almost surgical. Most people walking through the armory saw exactly what they expected to see, a quiet woman in coveralls, doing routine weapon cleaning. What they didn't notice was the way she handled each component with an intimacy that spoke of years beyond simple maintenance training, or how her eyes automatically cataloged serial numbers and modifications that weren't supposed to exist on base weapons. For 3 years, Elena had been invisible in plain sight, and that's exactly how she preferred it. Until the morning Admiral Catherine Hayes walked through those doors and caught sight of something that changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn darkness still clung to the Virginia coastline when Elena Rodriguez arrived at Naval Station Norfolk's weapons maintenance facility. At 5:30 a.m., the armory was her domain, a sterile world of gun oil, metal, and the methodical rhythm of disassembly and inspection. She clocked in using her civilian contractor badge, grabbed her standard-issue coveralls from her locker, and began her daily routine that had remained unchanged for 3 years. Elena preferred the early morning shift for several reasons, though she kept those reasons to herself. The fewer people around, the better she could work without interruption or unnecessary conversation. At 34, she had perfected the art of professional invisibility. Her supervisor, Tony Mitchell, barely acknowledged her presence most days. Content that she consistently met her quotas and never caused problems. The weapons maintenance bay stretched the length of a football field, lined with workbenches equipped with specialized tools and cleaning equipment. Elena's assigned section was near the back, away from the main traffic flow where officers and senior personnel occasionally conducted inspections. She had specifically requested this location when she started the job, citing her preference for quiet work environments. Her first task of the day involved processing a shipment of M4 carbines that had come in from a training exercise. Elena methodically logged each weapon's serial number into the digital tracking system, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. To anyone observing, she appeared to be following standard protocol. What they wouldn't notice was how she automatically cross-referenced each serial number against mental databases that shouldn't have existed in the mind of a civilian contractor. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Peterson walked through the armory at 6:45 a.m., conducting her weekly inspection tour. Peterson was a by-the-book officer who had been assigned to oversee civilian contractors working with sensitive equipment. She nodded briefly at Elena, who looked up from her workbench and returned a polite smile. "Morning, Rodriguez. How's the processing coming along?" "On schedule, ma'am. Should have this batch completed by 0800. Elena replied in the soft-spoken manner that had become her trademark around the base. Peterson glanced at the neatly organized weapons laid out on Elena's bench, noting the systematic approach to the work. "Good. Make sure you're logging everything properly. We've had some discrepancies in other sections." "Yes, ma'am." Double-checking all entries. The lieutenant commander moved on without further comment, already mentally focused on her next inspection. "Stop." To Peterson, Elena represented the ideal civilian contractor, competent, quiet, and requiring minimal supervision. She never questioned why someone with Elena's obvious skill level and attention to detail was content with routine maintenance work, or why she had specifically requested assignment to weapons systems rather than general equipment repair. By 7:30 a.m., the armory began filling with military personnel starting their day shifts. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Thompson arrived with his usual coffee and immediately began reviewing overnight reports. Thompson had been managing armory operations for 6 years and prided himself on running an efficient operation. He appreciated Elena's consistency, but viewed her as simply another contractor fulfilling a necessary but unremarkable function. "Rodriguez," Thompson called out as he passed her workstation. "When you finish that batch, we've got some specialized equipment coming in this afternoon. Might need extra attention." Elena looked up from the rifle she was cleaning, her expression professionally neutral. "What kind of specialized equipment, Chief?" "Some custom modifications from the Special Operations Command. Probably just routine maintenance, but they're particular about their gear." "Understood. I'll make sure to schedule adequate time." Thompson nodded and continued his rounds, missing the brief flicker of interest that crossed Elena's features before she returned to her work. The mention of special operations equipment was the first deviation from routine she had encountered in weeks, and it represented exactly the kind of intelligence she had been positioned to collect. The morning progressed with typical armory routine. Enlisted personnel brought weapons for cleaning and inspection. Officers conducted equipment reviews, and contractors like Elena processed the steady flow of maintenance requests. She moved through it all with quiet efficiency, her presence so routine that conversations continued around her as if she weren't there. Around 9:15 a.m., two junior officers stopped near Elena's workstation to discuss weekend plans. Ensign David Walsh and Lieutenant Junior Grade Jennifer Park had developed a habit of conducting personal conversations in the armory, apparently viewing the civilian contractors as part of the furniture rather than people who might overhear sensitive information. "I still can't believe they're rotating us to Norfolk permanently," Walsh complained, leaning against a nearby workbench. "I was hoping for something more exciting than equipment maintenance." "At least we're not stuck on a ship for months," Park replied. "Plus, the security briefings here are pretty interesting. Some of the classified projects they showed us yesterday were incredible." Elena continued her work, giving no indication that she was listening, but her trained memory automatically cataloged the reference to classified briefings and ongoing projects. This type of casual intelligence gathering had been her primary value for the past 3 years, though the officers discussing sensitive information would have been horrified to know their conversations were being systematically recorded and analyzed. The conversation shifted to personal topics, but Elena had already heard what mattered. The reference to new classified projects aligned with intelligence reports she had been expecting. Her role required patience above all else, collecting fragments of information that individually seemed meaningless but collectively painted detailed pictures of naval operations and security procedures. At 10:30 a.m., Elena took her scheduled break in the armory's small break room. The space contained basic amenities, a coffee machine, microwave, and several tables where contractors and lower-ranking personnel could eat away from the main administrative areas. She preferred to eat alone, using the time to mentally organize the information she had collected during her shift. Tony Mitchell joined her, settling into a chair with his ever-present clipboard and permanent expression of mild frustration. "Rodriguez, I need you to start training the new contractor next week. Corporate finally approved additional personnel for the specialized weapons section." Elena looked up from her sandwich. "What kind of background does the new person have? Civilian like you?" "Some military experience, but mostly basic maintenance training. You'll need to show them our procedures. Make sure they understand the paperwork requirements. Any security clearance issues?" Mitchell shook his head. "Standard contractor clearance, same as yours. Nothing too sensitive, just routine maintenance on standard equipment." Elena nodded, though she found it interesting that additional personnel were being assigned just as new classified projects were apparently being introduced to the base. The timing suggested changes in operational tempo that might require closer attention. After her break, Elena returned to find a senior petty officer waiting at her workstation with a clipboard and an expression of bureaucratic determination. Petty Officer First Class Amanda Foster was responsible for quality control inspections and took her duties seriously. Rodriguez, I need to conduct a random spot check of your work. Nothing personal, just routine compliance verification. Of course, Petty Officer. What would you like to review? Foster spent the next 20 minutes examining Elena's documentation, cross-referencing serial numbers, and inspecting several weapons Elena had already processed. Her review was thorough but revealed nothing unusual. Elena's work consistently exceeded standards and her paperwork was meticulous. Everything looks good, Foster concluded. Your accuracy rate is actually among the best in the facility. Keep up the good work. Elena accepted the praise with appropriate modesty, though internally she noted Foster's comment about accuracy rates. Maintaining consistent excellence while avoiding exceptional performance that might draw unwanted attention required careful calibration. She needed to be competent enough to avoid scrutiny while remaining unremarkable enough to stay invisible. Afternoon brought a steady stream of routine work, punctuated by occasional interactions with military personnel who treated her with the distant politeness reserved for civilian contractors. Elena processed each weapon with the same methodical care, documented everything precisely, and maintained the professional demeanor that had served her well for 3 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As her shift neared its end, Elena began the daily routine of securing her work area and preparing equipment for the evening shift. The specialized equipment Chief Thompson had mentioned still hadn't arrived, but she made mental notes about storage procedures, and Elena Rodriguez had spent 3 years building a perfect cover, and tomorrow she would continue the patient work of intelligence collection that had already provided invaluable insights into naval operations. But changes were coming to Norfolk, and soon her careful invisibility would be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The next morning brought an unusual delivery to Naval Station Norfolk's weapons maintenance facility. Elena arrived at her customary 5:30 a.m. to find Chief Warrant Officer Thompson already present, supervising the unloading of several secured transport cases. The early arrival of both the shipment and the chief suggested something significant was happening. Rodriguez, glad you're here early, Thompson called out as she approached her workstation. This is the specialized equipment I mentioned yesterday. SOCOM wants these processes with priority handling. Elena examined the transport cases, noting security seals and classification markings that indicated contents far more sensitive than routine maintenance items. The cases bore shipping labels from Naval Special Warfare Development Group, commonly known as SEAL Team 6, though such designations were rarely used officially. What's the timeline on these, Chief? Elena asked, pulling on her work gloves. Complete. Inspection and maintenance by the end of week. They're deploying again soon and need everything certified mission ready. Thompson paused, studying her face. Think you can handle the workload? Shouldn't be a problem. I'll start with the priority items first. What Thompson didn't realize was that Elena's confident response came from extensive familiarity with the exact type of equipment being delivered. The transport cases contained customized weapon systems that she had not only maintained before, but had personally field-tested in operational environments that officially didn't exist. Elena began the methodical process of documenting and opening the first transport case. Inside, nestled in custom foam padding, lay a heavily modified M4A1 carbine with attachments and modifications that represented millions of dollars in research and development. The weapon featured an advanced suppressor system, specialized optics, and internal modifications that pushed the platform beyond standard military specifications. As she lifted the weapon from its case, Elena's hands automatically found the perfect grip positions, her muscle memory recognizing the precise balance and weight distribution. To any observer, she appeared to be carefully examining unfamiliar equipment. In reality, She was conducting an inspection of a weapon system she knew more intimately than most of the engineers who had designed it. Lieutenant Commander Peterson arrived at 7 a.m. for her routine inspection, but stopped when she noticed the specialized equipment. Rodriguez, how are you finding the new gear? Anything unusual? Alina looked up from the disassembled weapon, her expression appropriately uncertain. It's definitely more complex than standard equipment, ma'am. Lots of custom modifications I haven't seen before. Take your time with it. This isn't standard maintenance work. Peterson examined the components spread across Elena's workbench, noting the systematic organization. You seem to have a good handle on the disassembly process, though. The basic principles are similar, just more components to track. Peterson nodded approvingly. She had no way of knowing that Alina was actually impressed by several design improvements that had been implemented since her last direct experience with this weapon system. The modifications represented significant advances in suppressor technology and optical integration that spoke to ongoing development programs. Around 8:30 a.m., two individuals Alina didn't recognize entered the armory. They wore civilian clothes but carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of special operations personnel. Chief Thompson escorted them directly to Elena's workstation. Rodriguez, this is Mr. Collins and Ms. Bradley from the manufacturer. They're here to observe the inspection process and answer any technical questions. Alina stood respectfully as the visitors approached. Collins was a lean man in his 40s, with the quiet intensity common among former military personnel who had transitioned to defense contracting. Bradley appeared to be in her early 30s, with the focused demeanor of someone deeply familiar with complex weapon systems. Ma'am, sir, Alina acknowledged them with appropriate deference. Collins examined the disassembled weapon on her workbench, noting the precise organization of components. You've got good technique. How long have you been working with specialized systems? This is actually my first exposure to equipment this advanced, sir. I'm being very careful to follow all the documentation. Bradley stepped closer, observing Elena's handling of a particularly sensitive optical component. You're not wearing gloves for the optics work. Elena paused, realizing she had unconsciously switched to bare-handed handling for components that required direct tactile feedback, a technique used by experienced operators who understood the equipment's tolerances. I can put gloves back on if you prefer. I thought I could get a better feel for any irregularities without them. No, you're right, Bradley said, surprise evident in her voice. That's exactly the correct approach for those components. Most maintenance personnel don't realize that. Collins was now paying closer attention to Elena's work methods. Where did you learn to handle precision optics that way? Elena felt a moment of concern but maintained her composed demeanor. I read through all the technical manuals before starting. The documentation mentions sensitivity to handling oils. Most people don't read that carefully, Collins observed. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Robert Nash, the base's executive officer. Nash was known for his attention to detail and direct communication style. He had come to personally oversee the inspection of high-value equipment. How's the assessment progressing? Nash asked Thompson. Rodriguez here is making good progress, sir. The contractor seemed satisfied with her approach. Nash examined Elena's workstation, noting the methodical organization and documentation. Rodriguez, what's your assessment of the equipment condition? So far, Elena carefully chose her words. Everything appears to be in excellent condition, sir. Very well maintained. I've noted some minor wear patterns that are consistent with normal operational use. Anything concerning? No, sir. If anything, the maintenance history suggests very careful handling by the previous users. What Elena didn't mention was her recognition of specific wear patterns that indicated the weapons had been used in maritime environments, salt water exposure that created distinctive corrosion patterns. This suggested recent deployment in coastal or shipboard operations. information that would be valuable to her actual handlers. Bradley was studying Elena's documentation notes. "You're recording very detailed observations. This level of detail isn't typically required for routine maintenance. I like to be thorough, ma'am, especially with equipment this specialized." Collins nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of attention we like to see." After the officials left, Elena continued her work with heightened awareness that she was being more closely observed than usual. The arrival of manufacturer representatives suggested these weapons had been recently used in significant operations, and their current inspection was likely preparation for immediate redeployment. Around 10:15 a.m., Elena noticed something that made her pause. Inside the stock of the second weapon, she found a small notation etched into the metal a series of numbers and letters that appeared to be an operational designation. The marking was nearly invisible and would have been missed by routine inspection, but Elena recognized it as a tracking system used by specific special operations units. The designation told her several important things. The weapon had been used in a classified operation within the past 6 months. It had been assigned to a specific operator rather than general unit use, and the mission had been significant enough to warrant permanent marking for future reference. Elena photographed the marking with a technique that appeared to be routine documentation but actually captured the information for later transmission to her handlers. This type of operational intelligence was exactly why she had been placed in this position. At 11:45 a.m., Petty Officer Foster returned for another inspection, this time accompanied by a senior chief Elena hadn't met before. Senior Chief Janet Morrison was responsible for oversight of all classified equipment maintenance and had a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsessiveness. "Rodriguez, Senior Chief Morrison wanted to observe your work with the specialized equipment." Morrison examined Elena's progress without comment for several minutes, studying both the weapons and Elena's documentation methods. Her inspection was more detailed than anything Elena had previously experienced at Norfolk. "Your technique is very good," Morrison finally said. "Have you worked with similar systems before?" "No, Senior Chief. This is my first assignment with this type of equipment." "Interesting. Your handling suggests more experience than your file indicates." Elena felt a spike of concern but maintained her composure. "I've always been careful with precision equipment, Senior Chief. I take the training seriously." Morrison continued her examination, paying particular attention to Elena's tool selection and component handling. "Your tool organization is very systematic, almost military standard. I like to stay organized. Helps prevent mistakes." "Indeed, it does." Morrison made notes on her clipboard before addressing Petty Officer Foster. "Continue monitoring this contractor's work. I want daily reports on progress and methodology." After Morrison left, Foster remained at Alana's workstation. "The Senior Chief seems impressed, but she's also suspicious. Be careful not to appear too competent." The warning was more perceptive than Foster realized. Elena's challenge was maintaining her cover while handling equipment that required expertise beyond what a civilian contractor should possess. Every interaction carried the risk of revealing knowledge that would raise uncomfortable questions. During her lunch break, Elena used a secure communication device hidden in her personal vehicle to transmit preliminary intelligence about the weapons and their operational markings. The information would be processed and analyzed within hours, potentially providing valuable insights into recent special operations activities. The afternoon brought additional challenges when Captain Nash returned with Admiral Patricia Hawthorne, the base commander. Hawthorne was conducting a surprise inspection of high-value equipment maintenance procedures, and Elena's workstation was selected for detailed review. "Captain Nash tells me you're making excellent progress with the specialized systems," Admiral Hawthorne said. "Yes, ma'am. Everything is proceeding on schedule. Hawthorne examined the weapons Elena had already processed, noting the documentation and certification tags. Your work appears very thorough. What's your background before this position? Elena had prepared for this question but delivered her cover story with appropriate nervousness. General maintenance work, ma'am. Some automotive repair, some industrial equipment. This is my first position working with military systems. Interesting career transition. What attracted you to this type of work? The training opportunities. And job security, ma'am. It's steady work with good benefits. Hawthorne nodded, though Elena sensed continued interest in her background. The Admiral's question suggested routine personnel review, but Elena recognized the pattern of an intelligence professional probing for inconsistencies. Rodriguez, Hawthorne said, I understand you specifically requested assignment to weapons maintenance rather than general equipment repair. That's unusual for someone without prior military experience. Elena had anticipated this line of questioning, but felt the weight of multiple senior officers studying her response. I thought it would be more challenging work, ma'am. More opportunity to develop specialized skills. And how are you finding the challenge level? Very educational, ma'am. I'm learning something new every day. The Admiral seemed satisfied with Elena's responses, but Elena noted how Hawthorne's eyes lingered on her hands that showed none of the typical wear patterns of someone new to precision mechanical work. Years of weapons handling had created specific callus patterns and muscle development that were difficult to disguise completely. As the inspection concluded, Elena realized that her cover, while still intact, was receiving more scrutiny than ever before. The combination of specialized equipment, manufacturer oversight, and senior officer attention was creating visibility she had previously avoided. The remainder of her shift passed without incident, but Elena was acutely aware that tomorrow would bring continued observation and potentially more challenging questions. The specialized weapons were providing valuable intelligence, but they were also forcing her to demonstrate expertise that pushed the boundaries of her civilian contractor cover. As Elena prepared to leave at the end of her shift, Chief Thompson approached with additional equipment. Rodriguez, good work today. The manufacturer representatives were impressed with your thoroughness. Thank you, Chief. There's more specialized equipment coming tomorrow, similar complexity level. Think you can maintain the same standards? Elena nodded confidently, though. She recognized that each day of working with advanced systems increased the risk of her true expertise becoming apparent. Absolutely, Chief. I'm getting more comfortable with the procedures. What neither Thompson nor anyone else at Norfolk realized was that Elena's comfort came from years of operational experience with the exact systems she was supposedly encountering for the first time. Tomorrow would test her ability to maintain that deception while continuing to gather the intelligence that justified her 3-year assignment. The specialized equipment had provided more valuable information in 2 days than Elena had collected in the previous 6 months, but it had also attracted attention that threatened the careful invisibility she had cultivated. The balance between intelligence gathering and operational security was becoming increasingly delicate, and Elena knew that one mistake could expose not just her mission, but the entire intelligence network that had placed her at Norfolk. The third day brought a crisis to Naval Station Norfolk in a form nobody had anticipated. Elena arrived at 5:30 a.m. to find the weapons maintenance facility in partial lockdown, with military police stationed at key access points and all civilian contractors being required to undergo additional security screening before beginning their shifts. Master-Arms First Class Robert Chen processed Elena through the enhanced security checkpoint with professional efficiency, but his questions were more detailed than routine screening typically required. Rodriguez, have you noticed anything unusual in your work area over the past few days? Any unauthorized personnel, missing equipment, security irregularities? Elena maintained her composed demeanor while internally cataloging the implications of the enhanced security. No master-at-arms. Everything has seemed normal to me. Any conversations with personnel about the specialized equipment you've been working on? Only official discussions with my supervisor and the manufacturer representatives. Chun completed his documentation and allowed Elena to proceed to her workstation. But she noticed additional security cameras had been installed overnight and armed. Personnel were maintaining a more visible presence throughout the facility. Chief. Thompson approached Elena's workstation with unusual urgency, his typical casual demeanor replaced by obvious stress. Rodriguez, we've got a serious situation developing. Some specialized equipment from another facility has gone missing, and there are questions about security protocols at multiple installations. Elena looked up from her preparation routine, allowing appropriate concern to show in her expression. Missing equipment, Chief? 3 custom weapon systems disappeared from Norfolk Naval Shipyard sometime between Monday and Wednesday. High-value items similar to what you've been working on here. Thompson paused, studying Elena's reaction. Naval Criminal Investigative Service is conducting a comprehensive review of all facilities handling similar equipment. The mention of NCIS involvement confirmed Elena's assessment that a significant security breach had occurred. The timing suggested the missing weapons might be connected to the intelligence network she had been monitoring, though she couldn't reveal her knowledge without compromising her cover. What does this mean for our work here, Chief? Everything gets documented in triplicate now. Every person who touches these systems gets background verification. Every procedure gets recorded. Thompson's stress was evident in his voice. NCIS. Agents will be conducting interviews with all personnel who have handled specialized equipment. Elena nodded appropriately while mentally preparing for more intensive scrutiny than her cover had previously faced. NCIS investigators were trained to detect deception and inconsistencies that might pass unnoticed by routine security reviews. At 7:15 a.m., Elena's concerns materialized when Special Agent Diana Walsh arrived at the weapons maintenance facility. Walsh was a senior NCIS investigator with expertise in internal security threats and stolen military equipment. Her presence indicated the investigation had moved beyond routine inquiry into serious criminal investigation. I need to speak with all contractors who have handled classified weapon systems, Walsh announced to Chief Thompson. Starting with anyone who has worked on the SOCAM equipment. Elena continued her work while observing Walsh's interview technique. With other personnel. The agent was methodical, professional, and clearly experienced in detecting deception. Her questions focused not just on recent activities, but on background details, personal circumstances, and potential motivations for security violations. When Walsh approached Elena's workstation, the scrutiny Elena had been anticipating finally arrived. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Special Agent Walsh from NCIS. I need to ask you some questions about your work with specialized weapon systems. Elena set down her tools and gave Walsh her full attention. Of course, Agent Walsh. Whatever I can do to help. Walsh's questions began routinely, but quickly became more probing. How long have you been working with classified military equipment? This is my first assignment involving classified systems. I started with the specialized equipment on Monday. What attracted you to this type of work? Elena repeated her cover story about career advancement and job security, but Walsh's follow-up questions revealed deeper investigation into Elena's background than had previously occurred. Your employment history shows several gaps between positions. Can you account for those periods? Elena had prepared explanations for the gaps that corresponded to periods when she had been deployed on classified assignments. But providing too much detail risked creating verifiable claims that might not withstand investigation. Some unemployment, periods between jobs, and I took time off to care for a family member who was ill. Walsh made notes while studying Elena's demeanor for signs of deception. Which family member? My mother. She had cancer treatment that required assistance with daily activities. The lie came easily because it was built around a true event. Elena's mother had indeed battled cancer, though Elena had been deployed overseas during most of the treatment period. The emotional authenticity would help the deception pass casual. Scrutiny. Where did this treatment take place? Elena provided details about medical facilities in her supposed hometown, information she had memorized as part of her cover identity preparation. Walsh's questions suggested routine verification rather than suspicion, but Elena recognized the investigation was more thorough than previous background reviews. After Walsh moved on to interview other personnel, Elena continued her work while observing the broader investigation unfolding throughout the facility. Additional NCIS agents had arrived to conduct detailed equipment inventories, and security protocols were being systematically reviewed and updated. Around 10:30 a.m., the investigation took an unexpected turn when Admiral Hawthorne arrived with a team of officials from Naval Intelligence. Their presence elevated the situation from criminal investigation to potential national security threat, indicating the missing weapons represented more than routine theft. Elena watched as Admiral Hawthorne conferred with Agent Walsh and other investigators. The Admiral's body language suggested serious concern about implications beyond the immediate equipment loss. When Hawthorne looked in Elena's direction, their eyes met briefly, and Elena sensed assessment rather than casual observation. Captain Nash joined the group of officials, bringing additional documentation that appeared to contain personnel files and security clearance information. Elena realized her background was likely being subjected to comprehensive review as part of the expanded investigation. "Rodriguez," Chief Thompson called out, approaching with obvious reluctance. "The investigators want to interview you again." More detailed questions this time. Elena followed Thompson to a conference room that had been converted into an interview facility. Agent Walsh was joined by a second NCIS investigator, Special Agent Marcus Webb, whose presence suggested the interview would be more intensive than their previous conversation. "Ms. Rodriguez, we need to clarify some details about your background and qualifications," Walsh began. "Your supervisor reports that your work with specialized systems has been exceptionally competent for someone without prior experience." Elena felt the first serious threat to her cover since arriving at Norfolk. "I've always been careful with technical work, Agent Walsh. I study the documentation thoroughly." Webb leaned forward. "Your tool handling techniques have impressed manufacturer representatives who typically work with highly trained military personnel. That's unusual for a civilian contractor." Elena recognized the investigators were building towards specific concerns about her competence level. Her response needed to address their observations without revealing expertise that couldn't be explained by her cover story. "I've always been good with mechanical work. I take pride in learning proper techniques," Walsh consulted her notes. Agent Webb spoke with the manufacturing representatives who observed your work. They used terms like professional-grade technique and advanced understanding of system integration. Those are strong assessments. Elena felt the walls closing in but maintained her composure. "I'm flattered by their assessment. I try to be thorough." "Ms. Rodriguez," Webb said, "we've reviewed your employment history and found some inconsistencies. Time periods where your claimed activities don't align with available documentation." Elena's pulse increased, though she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Employment gaps that are longer than you initially indicated. References who are difficult to verify. Educational background that doesn't fully account for your technical competence." Elena realized the investigation had moved beyond routine background verification into serious scrutiny of her cover identity. Her responses would need to address specific concerns without creating additional inconsistencies. "I may have been unclear about some timeline details. I can provide additional documentation if needed." Walsh and Webb exchanged glances. a communication that suggested they had identified significant concerns about Elena's background. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with questions becoming increasingly specific about her personal history, technical training, and potential connections to military personnel. When the interview concluded, Elena returned to her workstation with the knowledge that her cover was under serious threat. The missing weapons had triggered an investigation that was subjecting her carefully constructed identity to scrutiny it had never been designed to withstand. The afternoon brought additional complications. When new security procedures were implemented throughout the facility, all contractors were required to work under direct supervision, with military personnel assigned to observe their activities and document their procedures. Petty Officer, Second Class Amy Johnson was assigned to supervise Elena's work. Johnson was competent and observant, creating another layer of scrutiny that limited Elena's ability to conduct covert intelligence gathering. "Sorry about the babysitting duty," Johnson said as she positioned herself to observe Elena's work. "Orders from above, nothing personal." Elena appreciated Johnson's straightforward approach. "I understand the necessity. Security has to be the priority." As Elena continued processing the specialized weapons under Johnson's observation, she noticed details that would normally be significant intelligence finds. Modified firing pins that indicated specialized ammunition use, wear patterns suggesting specific operational environments, and maintenance records that revealed deployment timelines. However, the constant supervision prevented Elena from documenting these observations using her usual covert methods. The investigation had effectively shut down her intelligence gathering capabilities while simultaneously threatening to expose her true identity. Around 2:45 p.m., the situation escalated further when Captain Nash received a secure communication that brought Admiral Hawthorne and additional naval intelligence personnel to the facility. Elena observed their arrival while continuing her supervised work, noting the increased urgency in their movements and communications. Chief Thompson approached Elena's workstation with news that confirmed her worst concerns. "Rodriguez, you're going to need to undergo an expanded background investigation. Standard procedure for all contractors working with classified systems during security reviews." Elena nodded acceptance while internally calculating how long her cover identity might withstand intensive investigation. The fictional background had been carefully constructed, but sustained scrutiny by professional investigators would eventually reveal inconsistencies that couldn't be explained. "What does the expanded investigation involve, Chief?" "Detailed verification of employment history, educational background, personal references, financial records. Could take several days to complete." Elena realized she was facing a critical decision point. Continue maintaining her cover and risk exposure, or find a way to extract from Norfolk before the investigation revealed her true identity. Either choice carried significant risks and would impact the broader intelligence operation. As her shift neared its end, Elena prepared her workstation under Petty Officer Johnson's continued supervision. The routine activities felt surreal given the investigation swirling around her, but maintaining normal behavior was essential until she could determine her next steps. "Rodriguez," Johnson said as Elena completed her documentation, "I hope this investigation gets resolved quickly. The extra security is making everyone nervous." Elena looked up from her final entries, studying Johnson's concerned expression. "I'm sure they'll figure out what happened with the missing equipment. Yeah, but in the meantime, we're all under suspicion." Not a comfortable feeling. Elena agreed while privately recognizing that Johnson's discomfort was nothing compared to the pressure Elena was facing. The investigation had transformed Norfolk from a comfortable intelligence-gathering position into a potential trap that threatened not just her mission, but her freedom and possibly her life. As Elena left the facility that evening, she was acutely aware that tomorrow might bring developments that would force critical decisions about her future at Norfolk. The missing weapons had created a security crisis that was exposing her carefully maintained cover to scrutiny. It might not survive. The balance between maintaining her cover and protecting the broader intelligence operation was becoming increasingly precarious, and Elena knew that time was running out to resolve the situation without catastrophic consequences for herself and her handlers. Elena arrived at Naval Station Norfolk on Thursday morning to find the security situation had deteriorated overnight. The weapons maintenance facility was now operating under what amounted to martial law conditions, with armed guards at every entrance and all personnel subject to random searches and interrogation. The enhanced security created an atmosphere of suspicion that affected everyone on base, but Elena faced unique challenges. Her cover required her to appear concerned, but not overly nervous, competent, but not suspicious, and cooperative without revealing information that could compromise her mission. Lieutenant Commander Peterson had been assigned additional oversight responsibilities and approached Elena's workstation with obvious stress. "Rodriguez, I need you to understand that everything you do today will be monitored and recorded. NCIS has installed audio and video surveillance throughout the facility." Elena nodded appropriately. "I understand, ma'am. Whatever is necessary for security." Peterson studied Elena's calm demeanor with something approaching suspicion. "Most of the contractors are pretty shaken up by these developments. You seem remarkably composed for someone under investigation." Elena recognized the probing nature of Peterson's comment and responded carefully. "I figure cooperation is the best approach, ma'am. I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm not worried about the investigation." "Interesting perspective," Peterson replied, though her tone suggested she found Elena's composure more concerning than reassuring. The morning's first crisis emerged when Elena was assigned to work on a weapon system that she immediately recognized as containing components from the missing Norfolk Naval Shipyard equipment. Serial numbers on key parts matched intelligence reports she had transmitted just days earlier, indicating the missing weapons had been partially cannibalized and their components integrated into other systems. Elena faced an impossible dilemma. Reporting her recognition of the components would require explaining knowledge she shouldn't possess, but failing to report them might make her complicit in whatever operation had resulted in their theft. Under Petty Officer Johnson's continued supervision, she had no opportunity for covert communication with her handlers. "Johnson," Elena said carefully, "some of these serial numbers look unusual. Different format from the others." Johnson examined the components Elena indicated. "Looks normal to me. Different manufacturers sometimes use different numbering systems." Elena persisted, trying to find a way to highlight the irregularity without revealing her knowledge of the missing equipment. "Should I flag them for additional verification? They just seem inconsistent with the documentation." "Rodriguez, you're overthinking this. Just process them according to the standard procedures." Elena realized that Johnson's lack of experience with specialized systems prevented her from recognizing the significance of the serial number discrepancies. The components from the stolen weapons were being integrated into Norfolk's inventory without detection by the personnel assigned to prevent exactly that type of security breach. Around 9:15 a.m., the situation became more complex when Commander Lisa Park arrived to conduct a comprehensive review of all specialized equipment maintenance procedures. Park was a naval intelligence officer with specific expertise in weapon system security, and her presence indicated the investigation was expanding beyond criminal inquiry into counterintelligence operations. Park's review methodology was more sophisticated than previous inspections. She examined not just Elena's work quality, but her decision-making processes, problem-solving approaches, and technical reasoning. The questions revealed an intelligence professional trained to identify individuals with hidden expertise or ulterior motives. "Rodriguez, your maintenance documentation shows exceptional attention to detail. Park observed while reviewing Elena's work logs. Your notation system is more comprehensive than required by standard procedures. Elena felt increasing pressure as Park's questions probed deeper into her methodology. I like to be thorough, Commander. Better to document too much than too little. Your notation system follows patterns typically used by military personnel with advanced technical training. Where did you learn these documentation methods? Elena recognized that Park had identified aspects of her work that revealed professional military training, despite her civilian contractor cover. Her response needed to address the observation without confirming Park's suspicions. I've always been organized with documentation. Previous employers emphasized thorough record keeping. Park made notes while studying Elena's facial expressions and body language for signs of deception. Could you provide examples of these previous employers who emphasized military standard documentation? Elena provided names and details from her cover story, but Park's follow-up questions revealed investigation into those employers had already begun. Several claimed references had proven difficult to verify, and employment timelines contained gaps that couldn't be satisfactorily explained. Ms. Rodriguez, we've attempted to contact several of your previous supervisors and found discrepancies in the information you provided. How do you explain these inconsistencies? Elena felt the net tightening around her cover identity, but maintained her composure. I may have been unclear about some details, Commander. I can provide additional contact information if needed. Park's expression suggested she was unconvinced by Elena's explanations. We'll need comprehensive documentation of your background, education, and employment history. Any inability to provide verification will require additional investigation. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with Park's questions becoming increasingly specific about Elena's technical knowledge, personal circumstances, and potential connections to military or intelligence communities. Elena navigated the questioning carefully, but recognized her cover story was being systematically dismantled by professional investigators. After Park concluded her interview, Elena returned to her supervised work with the knowledge that her position at Norfolk was becoming untenable. The investigation had identified too many inconsistencies in her background to ignore, and continued scrutiny would eventually reveal her true identity. The midday period brought additional pressure when Special Agent Walsh returned with a team of forensic specialists to conduct detailed analysis of all equipment Elena had processed. Their examination included techniques that could reveal fingerprints, DNA evidence, and other forensic indicators that might compromise Elena's carefully maintained identity. Rodriguez, Walsh announced, we need to collect fingerprint and DNA samples from all personnel who have handled the specialized equipment, standard elimination procedures. Elena agreed to the sample collection while internally calculating the implications. Her fingerprints and DNA were not in standard law enforcement databases under her real identity, but sophisticated intelligence databases might contain records that could be accessed if the investigation escalated to counterintelligence levels. Forensic collection process was conducted with professional efficiency, but Elena noticed the samples were being prepared for expedited analysis rather than routine processing. The urgency suggested investigators suspected foreign intelligence involvement and were prepared to access classified databases if necessary. Around 1:30 p.m., Elena's situation became critical when Admiral Hawthorne arrived with two individuals. Elena immediately recognized as Defense Intelligence Agency personnel. DIA involvement indicated the investigation had escalated to national security levels, bringing resources and investigative techniques that her cover identity could not withstand. Elena continued her work under increasingly obvious surveillance. While observing the DIA officers conferring with base personnel, their presence represented the most serious threat to her mission since arriving at Norfolk, and she recognized that extraction might become necessary within hours rather than days. Chief Thompson approached Elena's workstation with instructions. that confirmed her worst fears. Rodriguez, you're being temporarily suspended from work involving classified equipment pending completion of the background investigation. Elena accepted the suspension with appropriate concern while recognizing it effectively ended her intelligence gathering mission at Norfolk. What does this mean for my employment, Chief? That depends on the investigation results. For now, you'll be assigned to general maintenance duties in unclassified areas. The reassignment removed Elena from access to the intelligence she had been positioned to collect, but it also reduced immediate scrutiny and might provide opportunities to assess her options for extraction or mission continuation. Elena spent the afternoon conducting routine maintenance in areas of the base that held no intelligence value, under continued supervision but with less intensive monitoring. The mundane work provided time to consider her rapidly deteriorating situation and plan potential responses to various investigation outcomes. Around 3:45 p.m., Elena observed Admiral Hawthorne and the DA officers departing the weapons maintenance facility, but their departure brought no relief. Additional security measures were being implemented, and Elena noticed personnel conducting what appeared to be counterintelligence sweeps throughout the facility. Petty Officer Johnson, who had been supervising Elena throughout the day, approached with news that confirmed Elena's assessment of the situation. Rodriguez, I've been told to inform you that you'll need to report to the base security office tomorrow morning for additional questioning. Elena nodded acceptance while recognizing that tomorrow's questioning would likely involve interrogation techniques designed to break down her cover story and reveal her true identity. Professional interrogators would have access to information that could systematically destroy the fictional background she had maintained for 3 years. What time should I report, Petty Officer? 0800 hours. Bring any personal documentation you have regarding your background and employment history. Elena agreed to the requirements while internally preparing for what might be her final day at Norfolk. The investigation had reached a point where maintaining her cover would require deception that professional interrogators were specifically trained to detect and expose. As Elena prepared to leave the facility at the end of her shift, she was approached by Lieutenant Commander Peterson with a final instruction that eliminated any remaining doubt about her compromised position. Rodriguez, effective immediately, your base access is restricted to essential areas only. You'll be escorted to and from all work locations and required to check in with security every 2 hours. Elena accepted the restrictions with appropriate compliance while recognizing they represented preparation for arrest rather than routine security measures. The investigation had clearly identified her as a primary suspect in whatever security breach had occurred. I understand, ma'am. I'll comply with all security requirements. Peterson studied Elena's continued calm demeanor with obvious suspicion. Most people in your situation would be more concerned about these restrictions. Elena realized her composure was working against her, appearing suspicious rather than innocent. I'm concerned, ma'am, but I figure cooperation is my best option. Perhaps we'll see what tomorrow's questioning reveals. As Elena left Naval Station Norfolk that evening, she was acutely aware that she might not return as a free person. The investigation had systematically dismantled her cover story and identified inconsistencies that could not be explained without revealing her true identity and mission. Elena faced critical decisions about whether to attempt extraction before tomorrow's interrogation, continue maintaining her cover despite its obvious compromise, or find some middle ground that might preserve both her mission and her freedom. Each option carried significant risks, and time was running out to make choices that would determine not just her fate, but the broader intelligence operation that had placed her at Norfolk, the resistance and dismissal she had observed throughout. The day indicated that base personnel were increasingly suspicious of her background and competence level. Tomorrow would bring interrogation designed to expose the truth about Elena Rodriguez, and she was no longer confident her carefully constructed identity could survive professional scrutiny. Elena spent Thursday night in her modest apartment off base, knowing it might be her last evening of freedom. She had maintained communication silence with her handlers since the investigation began, but the deteriorating situation at Norfolk demanded immediate contact despite the security risks involved. Using encrypted communication protocols she had hoped never to employ, Elena transmitted a priority message to her operational control. Cover compromised. Investigation escalated to DIA level. Request immediate extraction authorization or alternative instructions. The response came within 2 hours. Maintain cover. Asset positioning is too valuable to abandon. New developments require continued presence at Norfolk. Support en route. Elena stared at the message with growing concern. Her handlers were ordering her to continue a mission that was almost certainly going to result in her capture and exposure. The reference to new developments suggested intelligence priorities had shifted, but not in ways that considered her increasingly desperate situation. Friday morning arrived with an unseasonably heavy fog rolling in from Chesapeake Bay, creating an atmosphere that matched Elena's mood as she prepared for what might be her final day at Norfolk. She dressed carefully in her standard work clothes, knowing that by evening she might be wearing detention facility attire instead. Elena arrived at Naval Station Norfolk at 7:45 a.m. for her 8 o'clock appointment with base security, but found the weapons maintenance facility buzzing with unexpected activity. Additional personnel were conducting equipment inventories, and she noticed several faces she didn't recognize, individuals whose bearings suggested special operations or intelligence backgrounds. Master-at-Arms First Class Sheen escorted Elena to the base security office, where she found Special Agent Walsh waiting with a setup that indicated serious interrogation rather than routine questioning. The room contained recording equipment, multiple chairs arranged for psychological pressure, and documentation that suggested comprehensive preparation for breaking down her cover story. "Ms. Rodriguez, please have a seat," Walsh directed her. Professional demeanor carrying undertones of anticipated confrontation. "We have significant questions about your background and activities at this installation." Elena sat calmly while internally preparing for interrogation, techniques she had been trained to resist, but had hoped never to face in an operational context. "I'm ready to answer any questions, Agent Walsh." Walsh opened a thick file containing documentation Elena recognized as the comprehensive investigation results. "Ms. Rodriguez, our investigation has revealed multiple discrepancies in your background that cannot be explained by simple errors or memory lapses." Elena maintained eye contact while Walsh outlined the investigative findings. Employment records that didn't align with Social Security earnings reports, educational claims that couldn't be verified with actual institutions, and references who either couldn't be located or provided conflicting information about Elena's background. "These aren't minor inconsistencies," Walsh continued. "They represent systematic deception about your identity and qualifications. We need to understand why you've constructed a false background and what your actual objectives are at this installation." Elena recognized the interrogation was beginning in earnest and responded with her prepared explanations. But Walsh's follow-up questions revealed an investigation that had gone far beyond routine background verification. Financial records, travel patterns, and even utility usage at her apartment had been analyzed for inconsistencies with her claimed lifestyle and employment history. "Ms. Rodriguez," Walsh said, consulting her notes, "your apartment lease was paid 12 months in advance with cash when you arrived in Norfolk. Your utility bills show usage patterns inconsistent with someone working standard contractor hours. Your vehicle registration shows previous ownership in a state where you claim never to have lived." Elena felt the systematic destruction of her cover identity, but maintained her composure. "Agent Walsh, I may have been unclear about some details of my background. I can clarify any specific questions you have." Walsh leaned forward, her expression indicating the interrogation was entering a more aggressive phase. Ms. Rodriguez, we're past the point of clarification. We know you've constructed a false identity. We need to understand who you really are and why you're here. Before Elena could respond, the interrogation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Nash with urgent information that changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Nash approached Walsh with obvious urgency and spoke in low tones that Elena couldn't overhear, but their body language suggested significant developments. Walsh's expression shifted from interrogation, focused to confusion as Nash provided information that clearly contradicted her assumptions about Elena's case. After several minutes of whispered conversation, Walsh turned back to Elena with a completely different demeanor. Ms. Rodriguez, we need to pause this interview. New information has come to light that requires verification before we continue. Elena was escorted to a holding room while Walsh and other officials conducted urgent consultations that suggested the investigation had taken an unexpected turn. Through the small window, Elena could see increased activity throughout the base security office, with personnel making urgent phone calls and reviewing documents with obvious priority. 2 hours passed before Elena was retrieved from the holding room, but instead of returning for interrogation, she was escorted to Admiral Hawthorne's office where a meeting was already in progress. The participants included Admiral Hawthorne, Captain Nash, Special Agent Walsh, and 2 individuals Elena didn't recognize, but whose bearing suggested senior intelligence personnel. Admiral Hawthorne addressed Elena directly upon her arrival. Ms. Rodriguez, we've received information that significantly changes our understanding of your situation. Before we proceed, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need a truthful answer. Elena prepared for the moment she had been dreading direct confrontation about her true identity. Yes, Admiral. Are you currently operating under the authority of any United States government agency? Elena realized the question represented a critical decision point. Acknowledging her intelligence role would end her mission but might provide protection under official channels. Denying it would continue the deception but leave her vulnerable to criminal prosecution. Before Elena could respond, one of the unidentified individuals stepped forward. Admiral, if I may, Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Deputy Director Harrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency. We need to discuss your situation privately. Elena recognized that her cover had been either compromised or officially acknowledged, ending 3 years of carefully maintained deception. The presence of a DIA Deputy Director suggested her mission had intersected with broader intelligence operations in ways she hadn't been briefed about. Admiral Hawthorne cleared the room except for Elena, Deputy Director Harrison, and one additional DIA official who introduced himself as Operations Director Sullivan. The private meeting that followed would determine Elena's immediate future and the continuation of her mission. Ms. Rodriguez, Harrison began, or should I say Commander Elena Rodriguez, formerly of Naval Intelligence Special Operations. Elena felt a mixture of relief and concern at the official acknowledgement of her identity. Yes, sir, that's correct. Harrison consulted classified documentation Elena recognized as her actual personnel file. Commander, your current assignment at Norfolk has intersected with a broader counterintelligence operation that requires immediate coordination between agencies. Elena realized her mission had become part of a larger operation without her knowledge. Explaining her handler's insistence that she maintain her compromised cover. What kind of coordination, sir? Sullivan leaned forward. Commander, the weapons theft at Norfolk Naval Shipyard was not random criminal activity. It was a targeted operation designed to test security responses and identify intelligence assets. Your mission at Norfolk placed you in position to observe the aftermath of that operation. Elena began to understand the broader implications of her situation. Sir, are you saying the theft was deliberate counterintelligence activity? Harrison nodded. a sophisticated operation designed to flush out foreign intelligence networks operating within naval installations. Your presence at Norfolk, while conducting legitimate intelligence gathering, inadvertently placed you in the middle of our counterintelligence sweep. Elena recognized that her 3-year mission had become unexpectedly valuable not for the intelligence she had gathered, but for her position as an observer of counterintelligence operations. What does this mean for my current assignment? Sullivan consulted his notes before responding. Commander, we need you to return to your cover identity and continue your work at Norfolk, but now as a deliberate counterintelligence asset rather than a covert intelligence gatherer. Elena felt the weight of a mission that was becoming far more complex and dangerous than her original assignment. Sir, my cover has been severely compromised. NCIS and base security have identified multiple inconsistencies in my background. Harrison smiled slightly. Commander, that investigation will discover that Elena Rodriguez is exactly who she claims to be. Her background will be verified completely under renewed investigation. Elena realized that her cover identity was being retroactively legitimized through official channels, a process that required resources and authority at the highest levels of government. How is that possible, sir? Commander, Sullivan explained, Elena Rodriguez has always been a real person with a real background. The discrepancies NCIS discovered were deliberate inconsistencies designed to test the thoroughness of their investigation. Elena understood she was being briefed on an operation far more sophisticated than her original mission parameters. Her cover identity had been designed not just to gather intelligence, but to serve as a test of Norfolk's security procedures and counterintelligence capabilities. Sir, what are my new mission parameters? Harrison opened a classified folder containing updated operational instructions. Commander, you will return to your maintenance duties with full knowledge that you are part of an ongoing counterintelligence operation. Your observations will now focus on identifying personnel who demonstrate unusual interest in the security investigation or show signs of foreign intelligence connections. Elena accepted the new mission parameters while recognizing the increased danger of operating as a known asset rather than an undetected observer. What about the base personnel who have become suspicious of my background? Sullivan addressed her concern directly. Admiral Hawthorne will be briefed on your actual status. She will ensure appropriate personnel understand your legitimate presence, while maintaining operational security for your continued mission. Elena realized her status at Norfolk was about to change dramatically. Instead of operating as an invisible contractor, she would be functioning as an acknowledged intelligence asset with official protection but increased visibility. Sir, how will this affect my relationship with base personnel who have been investigating my background? Harrison concluded the briefing with instructions that would reshape Elena's entire approach to her mission. Commander, you will discover that your background investigation has cleared you of all suspicions. Your competence and professionalism will be attributed to undisclosed prior military experience that you were not authorized to reveal during initial questioning. Elena left Admiral Hawthorne's office with mission parameters that were completely different from her original assignment, but which promised to provide intelligence opportunities that hadn't existed under her previous cover. The turning point had arrived not through exposure and failure, but through integration into a larger operation that valued her position exactly where she was. As Elena prepared to return to the weapons maintenance facility, she reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in a single morning. The investigation that had threatened to destroy her mission had instead revealed its true importance in ways she was only beginning to understand. The afternoon would bring new challenges as Elena navigated relationships with personnel who had suspected her background, but now armed with official authority that would protect her mission, while opening new avenues for intelligence collection that she had never previously considered possible. Admiral Hawthorne stood before the assembled personnel in the main conference. room of Naval Station Norfolk's administrative building, her expression carrying the weight of revelations that would fundamentally change how everyone viewed the past week's events. Elena sat among the civilian contractors, her positioning deliberate. She would experience the revelation alongside those who had dismissed and suspected her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Hawthorne began, "the investigation into recent security concerns has concluded with findings that I need to share with all personnel who have been involved in this matter." Special Agent Walsh sat at the conference table with documentation spread before her, her earlier confidence replaced by an expression Elena recognized as professional embarrassment. Chief Thompson fidgeted with his clipboard, clearly uncomfortable. With the formal setting and uncertain about what was coming, Lieutenant Commander Peterson had positioned herself near the front of the room, her usual composed demeanor showing cracks of anxiety. Over the past week, she had repeatedly questioned Elena's background and competence, and the formal nature of this briefing suggested those questions were about to be answered in ways she hadn't expected. "Admiral." Hawthorne consulted her notes before continuing. "The security investigation revealed that our facility has been under observation by a highly skilled intelligence professional for the past 3 years. This individual has been evaluating our procedures, documenting our vulnerabilities, and assessing our readiness to detect and respond to sophisticated threats." Elena maintained her position among the contractors while observing the reactions around the room. Confused glances were exchanged between personnel who were struggling to understand the implications of the Admiral's announcement. "Furthermore," Admiral Hawthorne continued, "the recent theft of specialized weapons from Norfolk Naval Shipyard was part of a coordinated counterintelligence operation designed to test our security responses and identify potential foreign intelligence assets operating within our installation." Commander Park, who had conducted the sophisticated background investigation of Elena just days earlier, leaned forward with obvious interest. Her expression suggested she was beginning to understand that her investigation had been part of a larger test rather than a routine security inquiry. Admiral Hawthorne's next words created the moment Elena had been anticipating for 3 years. "The intelligence professional who has been conducting this assessment is someone many of you have worked alongside daily, someone whose cover identity has been so effective that personnel at this installation have interacted with her regularly, while having no idea of her actual qualifications and mission." Elena felt every eye in the room scanning the assembled personnel, searching for clues about who among them might be the revealed intelligence operative. The contractors looked particularly confused, while military personnel began reassessing their colleagues with new scrutiny. "Before I identify this individual," Admiral Hawthorne said, "I want to address the professionalism and dedication she has demonstrated while conducting one of the most challenging and important counterintelligence operations in recent Navy history." Special Agent Walsh consulted her investigation files with growing realization, her expression indicating she was beginning to understand how thoroughly she had been misdirected by an operation far more sophisticated than she had recognized. Admiral. Hawthorne paused, allowing the tension in the room to build before delivering the revelation that would recontextualize 3 years of daily interactions. "Commander Elena Rodriguez has been operating under deep cover at this installation as part of a joint Navy-DIA counterintelligence operation." The silence that followed was profound. Elena remained seated among the contractors while the revelation sank in around the room. Chief Thompson's clipboard clattered to the floor as he stared at Elena with complete shock. Lieutenant Commander Peterson's face went pale as she processed the implications of her repeated dismissive treatment of a superior officer. "Commander Rodriguez," Admiral Hawthorne said, "please join me at the front of the room." Elena stood and walked to the front of the conference room, her movement transforming her from dismissed contractor to revealed intelligence operative in the space of a few steps. The change in how personnel tracked her movement was immediate and dramatic. The invisible woman had suddenly become the most important person in the room, Admiral Hawthorne continued her briefing while Elena stood beside her. The positioning, emphasizing the complete reversal of status that had just occurred. Commander Rodriguez graduated from the Naval Academy with highest honors, completed specialized training in counterintelligence operations, and has served with distinction in classified assignments around the world. Petty Officer Johnson, who had spent the week supervising Elena's work, stared with obvious disbelief. Her supervision of a superior officer created a situation she had never been trained to handle, and her expression showed the confusion of someone reassessing every interaction they had shared. Her mission at Norfolk required her to maintain a civilian contractor identity while conducting a comprehensive security assessment of our procedures, personnel, and responses to various types of threats, Admiral Hawthorne explained. The effectiveness of her cover operation demonstrates both her professional competence and significant vulnerabilities in our security awareness. Elena observed the faces around the room, noting different types of reactions to the revelation. Military personnel showed professional respect, mixed with embarrassment about their failure to recognize her true identity. Civilian contractors appeared confused about the implications for their own positions and relationships. Special Agent Walsh approached Elena with an expression that mixed professional admiration with personal chagrin. Commander, your cover identity was remarkable. The investigation revealed inconsistencies, but we never suspected the truth. Elena responded with the respect appropriate to Walsh's professional competence, while acknowledging the complexity of the situation. Agent Walsh, your investigation was thorough and professional. The inconsistencies were designed to test investigative capabilities rather than to deceive criminal investigation. Commander Park joined the conversation, her earlier suspicions now recontextualized as accurate assessment of Elena's advanced capabilities. Commander, your technical competence with the specialized weapons systems was what first indicated you had training beyond civilian contractor level. Elena nodded in acknowledgement. Commander, your observations were correct. Maintaining appropriate skill levels while avoiding suspicion required careful calibration throughout the mission. Lieutenant Commander Peterson approached with obvious discomfort about her previous interactions with Elena. Commander, I owe you an apology for my treatment during this assignment. I had no idea of your actual rank and qualifications. Elena responded with grace that emphasized the mission requirements rather than personal slight. Lieutenant Commander, your treatment was exactly what my cover required. Professional distance and appropriate oversight of civilian contractors was the correct approach. Chief Thompson remained near his fallen clipboard, clearly struggling to process the transformation of someone he had supervised for 3 years into a superior officer, whose mission he had unknowingly supported. His expression showed the confusion of someone who needed to completely restructure his understanding of recent events. Elena addressed Thompson directly, recognizing his particular difficulty with the situation. Chief, your management of the maintenance facility provided exactly the environment needed for successful mission completion. Your professionalism made this operation possible. Thompson retrieved his clipboard with obvious relief at Elena's acknowledgement of his role. Commander, I still can't believe you've been, 3 years of thinking you were. Chief, the effectiveness of the cover depended on natural reactions from all personnel. Your authentic management style was essential to mission success. Admiral Hawthorne regained control of the briefing to address broader implications of the revelation. The Counterintelligence Operation Commander, Rodriguez, has been conducting revealed significant security vulnerabilities that will require immediate attention and correction. Elena was handed a classified folder containing her mission findings, which she would now present openly rather than through covert channels. Admiral, the assessment identified systematic weaknesses in personnel security awareness, equipment tracking procedures, and response protocols for sophisticated threats. Briefing continued with Elena presenting findings that would reshape security procedures throughout the installation. Personnel who had dismissed her observations as civilian contractor concerns now listened with the attention appropriate to professional intelligence assessment. As the formal briefing concluded, Elena faced the complex task of transitioning from covert operative to acknowledged intelligence professional while maintaining working relationships with personnel who had unknowingly been part of her mission for 3 years. The revelation had accomplished its intended effect, demonstrating how easily sophisticated intelligence operations could penetrate naval installations and operate undetected for extended periods. Elena's successful mission represented both professional achievement and serious warning about security vulnerabilities that required immediate attention. The afternoon would bring individual conversations with personnel who needed to process their role in the operation, but the primary revelation was complete. Elena Rodriguez had transformed from dismissed civilian contractor to respected intelligence operative, fundamentally changing every relationship and interaction that would follow. The classified code that would soon be discovered on her arm would provide the final piece of evidence about her true identity and mission. But the revelation of her intelligence background had already accomplished the operation's primary objective, demonstrating how invisible threats could operate within trusted environments. 3 weeks after the revelation, Naval Station Norfolk operated under completely transformed security protocols. Elena, now openly acknowledged as Commander Rodriguez, worked in a new capacity as the installation's Director of Counterintelligence Assessment, but she had requested to maintain her workstation in the weapons maintenance facility where her mission had originated. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the armory as Elena conducted her final inspection of the specialized weapon systems that had triggered the investigation. Her work now carried official authority, but she had insisted on completing the technical assessment personally, using the same methodical approach that had characterized her cover identity. Admiral Hawthorne entered the facility for what had become a weekly consultation about security improvements. The Admiral's relationship with Elena had evolved from unknowing oversight to professional collaboration, though she still occasionally expressed amazement at the operation's sophistication. "Commander, the Pentagon is requesting a comprehensive briefing about the Norfolk operation," Admiral Hawthorne said, approaching Elena's workstation. "They want to implement similar counterintelligence assessments at installations worldwide." Elena looked up from the weapon she was inspecting, her demeanor now openly professional rather than deferentially civilian. "Admiral, I think the operation's success was largely due to the specific circumstances at Norfolk. Replicating it elsewhere would require significant adaptation." Admiral Hawthorne examined the detailed reports Elena had compiled about security vulnerabilities and recommended improvements. "Your assessment identified 47 specific weaknesses in our procedures. Most of them had been invisible to routine security reviews." Elena set down her tools and pulled back the sleeve of her uniform, revealing for the first time the classified tattoo that had been hidden beneath civilian contractor clothing for 3 years. The intricate design contained numerical codes and symbols that identified her clearance levels, operational assignments, and specialized training certifications. "Admiral, this identification was my backup authentication in case the mission required emergency extraction or official acknowledgement," Elena explained, indicating specific elements of the coded tattoo. "Each symbol represents different aspects of my actual qualifications and assignments." Admiral Hawthorne studied the detailed markings with fascination. "Commander, how many personnel at Norfolk would have recognized this identification if they had seen it?" "Perhaps a dozen individuals with appropriate clearance levels and counterintelligence training. The design was specifically created to be invisible to routine observation while providing immediate authentication to qualified personnel." Chief Thompson approached with his usual clipboard. though his demeanor toward Elena had undergone complete transformation since the revelation. Where he had once provided casual supervision, he now maintained respectful professional distance appropriate to their actual ranks. "Commander, the new security protocols you designed are being implemented throughout the facility," Thompson reported. "Personnel training is scheduled to begin next week." Elena appreciated Thompson's adaptation to the changed circumstances. "Chief, your insights about daily operational patterns were invaluable for developing realistic security improvements. The protocols need to work within existing workflows." Thompson had struggled initially with the revelation that someone he had supervised was actually a superior officer conducting classified operations, but he had adapted professionally to the new dynamic. "Commander, if I may ask, how did you manage to maintain your cover while conducting such a detailed assessment?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Chief, the key was remembering that Elena Rodriguez, the contractor, was a real person with genuine responsibilities. The cover worked because it was built around authentic work and authentic relationships." Lieutenant Commander Peterson joined the conversation, her previous dismissive attitude completely replaced by professional respect and obvious curiosity about Elena's actual background. "Commander, your technical competence with the specialized systems was remarkable. Where did you acquire that expertise?" Elena had been authorized to share certain details about her background to help personnel understand the operation's scope. "Lieutenant Commander, my previous assignments included direct support to special operations units. I've worked with these weapon systems in operational environments." Peterson examined the weapons Elena had been maintaining, now understanding why her techniques had impressed manufacturer representatives. "Commander, when you handled those precision optics without gloves, you were using operator-level techniques, correct? Maintaining appropriate skill levels while avoiding suspicion required constant calibration. Too little competence would have raised questions about my qualifications for the position. Too much competence raised questions about my background." Special Agent Walsh approached with documentation related to the broader counterintelligence operation that Elena's mission had supported. "Commander, the intelligence you gathered led to identification of 3 foreign operatives who had been conducting surveillance of East Coast naval installations." Elena reviewed the arrest reports with professional satisfaction. "Agent Walsh, those operatives had been trying to recruit assets among base personnel. Your investigation of my background actually helped expose their methods." Walsh smiled at the irony of the situation. "Commander, investigating you led us directly to the real threats we were looking for. Your cover operation was more successful than anyone anticipated." Petty Officer Johnson arrived with the final maintenance reports for the specialized equipment. Her interaction with Elena now formally correct despite their previous working relationship. "Commander, all systems have been certified mission-ready according to your specifications." Elena accepted the reports while noting Johnson's professional adaptation to the changed circumstances. "Petty Officer, your attention to detail during the supervised maintenance period was exemplary. That level of documentation will be standard procedure going forward." Johnson had initially been confused about having supervised a superior officer, but she had come to understand her role in confused about having supervised a superior officer. The broader operation. "Commander, were you evaluating my performance as well as the security procedures?" "Petty Officer, everyone at Norfolk was unknowingly participating in the assessment. Your professionalism and adherence to protocols demonstrated the high quality of personnel at this installation." As the morning progressed, Elena conducted final interviews with personnel who had been part of her 3-year mission. Each conversation helped process the complex emotions and professional adjustments required by the revelation of her true identity. Deputy Director Harrison arrived from DIA headquarters for a classified debriefing about the operation's broader implications. "Commander Rodriguez, the Norfolk mission exceeded all expectations. The intelligence gathered and security improvements implemented will benefit naval installations worldwide. Elena briefed Harrison on the final phase of her assessment. While maintaining her position at the weapons maintenance workstation where the operation had begun. Deputy Director, the mission's success was largely due to the natural environment at Norfolk. Personnel here demonstrated exactly the professionalism and dedication that made comprehensive assessment possible. Harrison examined Elena's detailed findings about security vulnerabilities and recommended countermeasures. Commander, your recommendations are being classified as essential reading for all counterintelligence personnel. This operation will serve as a model for future assessments. Elena reflected on the transformation of her mission from routine intelligence gathering to comprehensive counterintelligence operation. Deputy Director, the most valuable finding was how easily sophisticated threats can operate within trusted environments. The personnel at Norfolk aren't deficient. They're human beings working within systems that hadn't been designed to detect professional intelligence operations. As the afternoon concluded, Elena prepared to transition from her assignment at Norfolk to new duties that would apply the lessons learned from her 3-year mission. The weapons maintenance facility would continue operating with enhanced security procedures, but Elena's work there was complete. Admiral Hawthorne joined Elena for a final conversation in the facility where she had maintained her cover for 3 years. Commander, your sacrifice in maintaining this assignment was extraordinary. 3 years of being dismissed and overlooked while conducting critical intelligence work. Elena secured the classified weapons for the final time, her movements carrying the precision and authority she had been forced to conceal for years. Admiral, the mission required patience and acceptance of circumstances that weren't always comfortable. But the intelligence gathered and security improvements achieved made those sacrifices worthwhile. Admiral Hawthorne examined the coded tattoo on Elena's arm one final time, noting the intricate details that represented years of specialized training and classified assignments. Commander, that identification would have ended your cover instantly if anyone had seen it. Elena smiled as she rolled down her sleeve, concealing the markings that had remained hidden throughout her assignment. Admiral, sometimes the most important secrets are hidden in plain sight. People see what they expect to see, and they expect to see a civilian contractor doing routine maintenance work. As Elena prepared to leave Naval Station Norfolk for new assignments, she reflected on the complexity of human perception and the power of patient, professional intelligence work. For 3 years, she had been invisible while conducting one of the most important counterintelligence operations in recent Navy history. The weapons maintenance facility returned to routine operations, but with security procedures that would prevent the vulnerabilities Elena had identified and exploited. Her mission had demonstrated both the dedication of naval personnel and the sophisticated threats they faced, creating awareness that would enhance security throughout the fleet. Elena Rodriguez had spent 3 years being overlooked and dismissed while protecting the Navy from shadows. As Commander Rodriguez, she would continue that protection through new assignments and new challenges, carrying the lessons learned from her time as the invisible contractor who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.